Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Kathleen and I am an alcoholic. I'm really happy to be here tonight. Mike called me a while ago and asked me to come here and told me that I was coming to Westchester, so I thought I was coming to a really small little meeting down by the airport, and I'm actually shocked at the size of it, but it's been a wonderful meeting. I so enjoyed the birthdays, and I really enjoyed hearing Chapter 3, more about alcoholism, because I tried a lot of those things. I tried just drinking beer, just drinking on weekends, taking a trip, not taking a trip. And it's so good to hear that again. And I sponsor somebody who just got 30 days, and she asked me to be her sponsor when she had 4 days, and she wasn't sure if she was an alcoholic. So I told her, just try it for 30 days and see what happens. So that was yesterday, and she called me and told me that she didn't think she was an alcoholic, and we had this long discussion. And what she found out is she just wanted to drink because she couldn't stand the feelings that were coming up. Gee, that's something different, isn't it? So she's now trying it for 90 days, and hopefully she'll be here then. But anyway, I come from a long line of alcoholics. I'm from an Irish Catholic family, as many of you are in here, and the people in my family were either alcoholics or rageaholics. And my father was the alcoholic and my mother was the rageaholic. And alcoholism was a very shameful thing in my family. My mother's mother drank. In fact, my grandfather moved her out of Brooklyn into the country in the middle of nowhere so that he could get her away from her Irish relatives and she would stop drinking. And you know how that went. She even drank more. And my father's father died on Skid Row and was the black sheep of his family. And he died, he was living in a flop house in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and was very drunk and was taking sleeping pills and was smoking in bed and dropped the cigarette in his bed and burnt up the entire place. So alcoholism was very shameful because my father did not want to be like his father, and nobody talked about my father's drinking in my family. And looking back, that was probably the sickest thing about my family, that nobody talked about what was going on. My father had a good job, and my mother was president of the PTA one year, and I had two darling little sisters, and we had a nice house, and my father took the train to his job in New York City and came home, but nobody knew that he started drinking on the bar car. And he came home, and the curtains went down, and it was total insanity in that house, but we didn't talk about it, because we were very secretive. And we didn't talk about it amongst ourselves, which I can't even believe today. There were 5 of us living there, and my father would come home, and you could hear his car coming down this gravel driveway. And we all would freeze. The 4 of us would freeze because he would walk around the corner, and he would either be drunk, and you'd be in for it for the night, or he'd be totally sober, and things would go on. But we didn't talk about this amongst ourselves. And I came out of that home with a lot of shame and a lot of frozen feelings. And it's taken me years in Alcoholics Anonymous to open up and to talk about how I feel and to let you know who I am. I adored my father. I think the alcoholics know each other at a very early age, and I just absolutely love this guy. Although when he drank, he became totally pathetic, and he changed so much. When I got older, I wasn't going to drink. I had no desire to have happen to me what happened to him, because this man that I adored just fell apart when he drank. And my story really starts in the late 60s when I went away to college. I couldn't wait to get away. I couldn't wait to get away from New Jersey and from my family, from my background. I was a preppy. I was very uptight. I had all those frozen feelings that I told you about. I had never been drunk. I had never had any experience to change the way I felt. And I went away to a really large, crazy school in Ohio, and I was there for about a week. And I was hanging around uptown one day in my little preppy plaid miniskirt and my little knee socks, and I had a little matching sweater. And I met a guy who was a hippie, and I'd never seen anybody like this before. He had really long hair, and he was dressed like hippies dress. And he asked me on a date, and we went on a date that evening, and we went to a farm because it was very hip to live on the land. And we drove way out to the middle of nowhere, and I was the only preppy at the party that evening. And they had tie-dyed sheets on the ceiling. They had these low-hung tie-dye sheets, and the only light came from candles, and everybody spoke in whispers. And nobody spoke to me because I was the only one in a plaid miniskirt with matching knee socks. But at that party that evening, they brought out a water pipe. I had never seen this before. I had never had anything to change the way I felt. I think I had one slow gin fizz in New York City when I was 17. The drinking age was 18, and we would sneak into there, and I had one drink in my life. But that evening, they brought out this water pipe. I smoked it. I got stoned. I loved it. And my life has never been the same since. And I am not exaggerating. My life changed at that moment, and I have never gone back to the life I had before. I instantly entered the world of being a hippie, too. I got rid of the knee socks and the plaid skirts, and I became a hippie, and all that stuff is back in style now, so it doesn't seem so strange. But I've done my time in overalls. I learned how to tie-dye. I didn't shave my legs for 2 years. And I was a hippie. I entered the world of drugs, and I loved the way they made me feel. And looking back, being so uptight, being so frightened, when I smoked that pot that evening, it was the first time in my life that I relaxed. And it changed the way I felt, and that's all I needed. I wanted to change the way I felt, and I didn't even know that. I wasn't going to drink for many years because, as I told you, I didn't want to be like my father. And I was a geographic taker. I've lived in a lot of places. My answer to life was to move. I didn't want to deal with life. I didn't want to deal with the people on the job, and I just didn't want to have to cope and grow up. So I literally just put everything in my car and moved. I've lived in a lot of different states. I've lived in a lot of different countries. I just kept going. I always kept my stereo speaker boxes because I would move so often. It was too hard to find boxes in the market to fit these speakers. So I always kept them so that I would have them. And my moving around I ended up living in Sun Valley, Idaho in the early 70s. And I took everything I had and got in my car and traveled around the country and ended up living in Idaho. Didn't know anybody, didn't know where I was going. I had graduated from college, and my ambition in life was to be a cocktail waitress. And I wanted to be a cocktail waitress so that I could only work during the winter and summer season. And I moved to Sun Valley. I was doing okay, and about a year and a half later, I crawled out of that town on my hands and my knees, and I crawled here to Los Angeles. And what happened there, being a cocktail waitress, I did start to drink, and it took me so fast. And I loved when I read in the big book that sometimes women go really quickly, and that's what happened to me. It was the fall up there, and I was trying to get my life together one more time. And about 3 months later, I moved here to Los Angeles. I met a man up there in a bar, and he invited me for dinner the next night, and I moved in the next night. That didn't seem strange to me until I was in the program for years, that normal people don't do that. Don't meet people in bars and move in with them the next evening. But I did that, and that man was a heavy drinker. In fact, he's an alcoholic. He has tried Alcoholics Anonymous, but he's never been able to stay sober. But thank God for him, because with him I started to drink. Now, I had never been able to function on alcohol. It always made me sick. I would pass out. But alcohol has never been a beverage for me. I have always drank to get drunk. It's never been anything for me but a way to change the way that I felt. And they talk in the big book about how we cross the line. And I remember, for me, when I crossed the line, I was in the kitchen in Idaho, and I was drinking, and I was getting drunk, and I could function for the first time. You know, I didn't throw up that evening, I didn't pass out, I could function, and that was it for me. So I moved to Los Angeles in the mid-'70s with this alcoholic boyfriend. We had a terrible relationship. I had a terrible life. And my last year, I drank for 1 year here before I came to the program. And my life was terrible. I got a job. I left the bar. I really believed if I could just get out of Sun Valley, Idaho, if I could stop being a cocktail waitress, if I could get away from those people that I lived with and worked with, that things were going to be okay. I really believed that. And I moved here, and the only problem with Los Angeles was that I was here when I got here. And I have since found out repeatedly over and over again that I am my problem. In fact, somebody told me early on in the program that I should put a little sign on my mirror that says, "You are looking at the problem." And I have had to face that over and over again. I did get a job teaching school. I would show up when I didn't have the flu one more time on Monday morning. I got hepatitis in Mexico before I moved here, and I was very physically sick. I still continued to drink. I still continued to use drugs. My liver hurt. I threw up a lot. I was desperate. I was hopeless. My life was over, and I was 25 years old. And I really didn't know how it happened to me. Because drugs and alcohol had really been fun for me for a couple of years. I was very adventurous. I was a free spirit. I went to Europe when I was 21. I hitchhiked around Europe by myself. I moved out west by myself. And it was fun. And it was over so quickly. And I didn't know how it happened. I was very suicidal, and I do believe if I wouldn't have found Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have had to kill myself. I wasn't afraid of dying, but I couldn't stand the way that I felt. And if you're new here tonight, I hope you hate your life. And I hope you hate the way you feel, and that you are ready to try something new, because that's what it takes to come here. It talks in step 1 how we have to really be willing. We have to hit bottom in order to be willing to change. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a big commitment, and it's a big change, but it's been worth every second of it for me. I found a new life here over and over again. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous really because I had no place else to go. I don't think I've met very many people over the years who have made a conscious decision to come to AA, who have said, "Oh, I think I'm an alcoholic, I'll go to AA." I think that somehow through the grace of God we stumble in here, and we all have our miracle that brings us in here. Now, I had been exposed to AA through my father. He did get sober in 1969. I had been to meetings. I've been going to meetings since 1969. In fact, I've had a copy of the big book since then. And he gave me a little 24-hour book, and he wrote inside of it. And on one of my bad drunks before I got here, I thought about that book that was packed away with my stereo speaker boxes. And I had a really bad hangover, and I went looking for it one day, and I found it, and it made me feel better. And a couple of months later, I came here. Now, as I told you, I really came here. It was a rainy Friday night, and I came to the Ohio Street meeting in West Los Angeles, and I really came because I had no place else to go that evening. That's where my life was. My alcoholic boyfriend was out of town for the weekend, and I knew one person in Los Angeles. And she was a woman that I had gone to school with back in Ohio, and she had just moved to Palm Springs, and she had 30 days of sobriety. And she and her boyfriend was sober for a while, and they asked me to come to a meeting with them. Now, they knew that I was having problems with my drinking, although I didn't talk about it, but somehow they figured it out. And my friend had told me a couple of years before that she was having problems with her drinking. and I had told her that my father went to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, it was the first time up until then, and for a long time after, that I told anybody that my father was in AA, because I was still very ashamed of the fact that he was an alcoholic. But I told her about AA. She was able to come here, and she turned around and brought me here. And when I came to the meeting that evening, I believe that it was my time. I've heard here, you can hear when you can hear, and you can see when you can see. And that was my moment in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to the meeting. The speaker who spoke was from my home state of New Jersey, and she talked about her feelings, and that really, really made an impression on me. Because being so shut down, being so frightened, this woman stood up in front of the room and told us how she felt, and that made an impression on me. I also felt safe in the room. Now, I didn't even consciously think about it. All this is in hindsight. But I felt a sense of safety being in the room that evening, and I hadn't felt safe for a long time. I also took the 20 questions that evening, and I answered yes to almost all of them. And I'd heard this speaker, and I looked at these 20 questions, and I turned to my friend, and I said, my God, I'm an alcoholic. And I had an experience, for me, it was a spiritual experience. The weight of the world came off my shoulders. And I had the most freeing feeling, and my life changed at that moment. And somebody pointed out to me years later that in chapter 3, it says that the first step for us is to concede to our innermost self that we're alcoholic. And that comes before chapter 5 and these 12 steps. And without knowing it that evening, I conceded to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. It didn't matter what you thought. A lot of you already knew that I was an alcoholic. But I said it to myself that it was over. I was an alcoholic. And the obsession to drink was taken from me. And I went to thank the speaker after she spoke, and I went to take my hand away. And she held onto my hand, and she said, I'm really glad you're here. And that really made an impression on me, that somebody took the time to be kind to me. Now, I'd like to tell you that I've been sober since that evening, but I haven't been, because I had to do AA my way. I had to do it my way, as I've had to do everything in my whole life, my way. I love when I read in step 2 that defiance is the outstanding characteristic of the alcoholic. I always had to do it my way. I think that, you know, coming from my family, there was a lot of, my parents were very controlling between the rageaholic and the alcoholic. My sisters and I were all fighters, and we all have gotten in trouble with our mouth. In fact, I was back east last week for a family party, and I was with both of my sisters, and we were driving out to Long Island for this party. And we came through the Midtown Tunnel, and we came up to the toll booth, and we were in the wrong lane. And my sister, who was driving, was supposed to have a token, and she didn't have a token. And the toll guy got very nasty. But it was, you know, he was in the position of power, and my sister called him a really bad name. And the guy came over and asked for her license, and my other sister, who's very square and straight, was looking out the front window like this, and I was in the back seat like this, because that's how I used to be, defiant. And, you know, we hear here, would you rather be right or would you rather be comfortable? Well, for years, I wanted to be right. Therefore, I was always uncomfortable. And that went on for years for me. I always had a big mouth. I always was a fighter. I was thrown out of the Girl Scouts when I was 12 years old because I told the Girl Scout leader that she was as rotten as they come. And it went downhill from there. But anyway, I had to do the program my way. And my way consisted of alcohol is what got me here. Alcohol is what surrendered me. Alcohol is what was making me so sick. So I chose to believe that it was okay that I still use drugs if I wanted to use drugs. But as long as I didn't get drunk, I was still sober. And I never went to meetings. I thought I'd had this wonderful spiritual experience. I had left the alcoholic boyfriend. I lived alone for the first time in my life. I would put on an old coat and I would find maybe some pot in there. I'd smoke it. I'd feel terrible. I'd find some pills hidden in the towels. I'd take them. I'd feel worse. And it was a terrible place to be. And that for me was the jumping off point because the drugs were not working. In fact, I even had a sip of alcohol one time. Nothing was working. I had no program, and drugs and alcohol weren't working. For me, I have to have one or the other. Either I have to be in the program and it has to work, or I have to have drugs and alcohol work. Now for me, that's over. I do believe for all of us it's over, or else we wouldn't be here. So I finally went to a meeting that someone told me to go to where there were a lot of young people, because this was a long time ago, and there weren't as many young people in AA. And I was actually going to take a chip for 90 days, even though I'd been taking drugs. But I heard what they were saying that evening, and they told me, just try it. Try it our way. Try it clean and sober for 30 days. Don't take anything to change the way you feel, and see what happens. And in May, I'll have 19 years just by trying it for 30 days. And 30 days turned into 6 months and 9 months and a year, and I can't believe I've been sober as long as I've been sober. And it's been, somebody mentioned journey, Lila, I think, and it's been a journey for me. It's been a lot of different journeys. I've had a lot of different lifetimes. It's been painful, it's been wonderful, and it's been absolutely worth it. My first year, now I also didn't do anything. I've never done anything unless my back's been against the wall. You know, I'd like to tell you I'm a virtuous person and I change because I love to change, but I don't. I just do what I'm doing until I can't stand doing it anymore, and then the pain will make me change. The pain has gotten my attention over and over again. I didn't get a sponsor right away. I didn't do anything. You know, I finally got sober, and at 30 days of sobriety, I went to the Palm Springs Roundup. I shouldn't even call it 30 days of sobriety. 30 days being dry. I went to the Palm Springs Roundup, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a gigantic convention that used to be held every June in Palm Springs. There are 3,000 alcoholics there. It's 120 degrees, and I hated it. I went with my one friend, the one who had brought me to the program. She fixed me up with somebody at the banquet, and I couldn't stand being with this person. I hated everybody there. I locked myself in my room. I thought maybe I'll go to a bar and have a Coke, because I know I could find somebody that I could talk to in the bar. But I didn't. I sat in the room that evening, and I just shook it out, and I was miserable. And the next day I went to the final meeting, and all 3,000 alcoholics were there in that meeting. And I came into the meeting, and the woman I had heard speak the first night at Ohio Street was right there in the aisle. And I went up to her and I said, I'm flipping out. I don't know what to do. And she was kind to me again. And she said, it's okay. Most of us feel that way. And she became my first sponsor. And my program totally changed. That was the first action I took. And I had somebody to call. I had one more friend in AA. I had somebody to meet at meetings, and my life changed. Now I entered the pink cloud phase. I was one of those newcomers you don't want to sit next to at a meeting. I couldn't sit still. I had to sit on my hands sometimes to make it through 90 minutes of a meeting. I had never been a coffee drinker. I never needed coffee. I had amphetamines. And my first year, I literally drank 20 cups of coffee a day. I never shut up. I never sat still. I lived by myself, and I would go home after the meeting, and I had these stereo headphones, and I would dance in the dark by myself till like 3 o'clock in the morning, because I was just wired all the time. I felt fabulous all the time, so I thought, and I thought I had found God, and I was so spiritual. I remember hearing a speaker talk who had 7 years of sobriety about emotional pain, and I thought, oh, there's no emotional pain in sobriety. Turn it over. Work the steps. And I would judge people for being in emotional pain. And now I've seen people like that get up to the podium and tell me that if I'm in pain, I'm not working my program. I don't think so. I have had a lot of pain since I've been here, and my pink cloud wore off right around my first year, and I'm glad I had that pink cloud, because I did fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous during that period. And you know, my life was such that I had nothing. I didn't have a life. My first sponsor said that I was a 25-year-old teeny bopper, and I was. I was a child trapped in a woman's body, totally unequipped for life. I had done nothing but live in ski resorts and have been a cocktail waitress. I never had a real job. I never took care of myself. I had this fantasy of what life was going to be, and it was a rude awakening to come off of that pink cloud and wake up. I had the experience in my first year. They talk in the 12 and 12 about boy meets girl on AA campus, and I got involved with another newcomer, and it was I always like to talk about this because it really got me going in the program. This was a man that if I met in a bar, we would not have had a drink together. I mean it. We were so different. We were like night and day. We would not have had a drink together. And we met in AA, and we had AA in common, and everything was fabulous. And we started a business that my father was the financial backer of. And the boyfriend was also on the pink cloud with me. And we thought we were so spiritual. And we thought that this was all God's will. Because my father was in AA, and my mother, who was also involved financially, was in Al-Anon. And my sister was living out here, and she was in Al-Anon. And the boyfriend and I were in AA. And we used to sit around and talk about how this business could not fail, and that how God would do this for us. And we had a business, we had a little office in Hollywood, and we were so spiritual that we called our company Step 3 Productions for the third step, because we were so spiritual and we were so good at working the third step. And we used to sit home, not at the office, but we would sit home and talk about how the business was going to take off and this was God's will. But we never showed up at the office. Apparently, God didn't show up either, because the entire business went bankrupt. It went down the toilet. The relationship was terrible. It was very destructive. I weighed 102 pounds. I couldn't eat during this period. I couldn't sleep. I was very isolated. I used to stay in my bed and unplug the phone, and I had 3 locks on my door, and I hid out for almost 2 years. And when this ended, I really had to go to work and start growing up and start working the program. And I started at the bottom. I started working, answering telephones for $150 a week, and I had to start at the very bottom. And you know, I'd always had problems in the work area, and after I was working for a while, I didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted to do, and I wasn't happy, and I was miserable, and I was tired all the time, and I hated my life. And I heard a man named Chuck Chamberlain speak, and I went up and talked to him after the meeting, and he told me to come and see him. And I drove down to his house, and I sat down and I started talking to him, and I told him about how I hated my job and I hated my life and I was tired all the time. And he said, "Wait a minute, you have got it all wrong, honey." He said, "You have to turn this around and make it a game." He said, "You've got to know that life is a giving thing, it's not a getting thing, and that God is your employer, and that you show up at that job every day, and you help God's kids do what they need to have done just because you want to, for fun and for free." And he said, "God will take care of the rest. God signs your paycheck. God is your employer. You have to get out of the way, and you have to show up and be of service and do the best that you can." And he told me, even if you start out shining shoes, if you shine each pair a little bit better than the last, pretty soon you'll be shining the Capitol Dome and you won't even know how you got there. And I didn't really have much choice. My back was against the wall. And I have a bad attitude. I come from a place of it's never going to be enough. I always want it to be more, better, or different. And I really believe that with an attitude like mine, you cannot pay me enough to go to work. Because if you paid me $1 million a week, it'd be great for about a month. And then it wouldn't be enough. Then I'd want $2 million a week. And it would go on, because that part of me is a bottomless pit. So that was very intriguing to me when Chuck told me to make it a game. And he said that as I was driving out of his driveway that day, he said, "Remember, it's just a game." And I was complaining to him, "Oh, I don't like certain meetings." He said, "Wait a minute. When you go to a meeting, you go with the motive to give, not to get. and you will always leave with a full cup if you go with the motive to give. And that changed my sobriety for me, to try to be of service and to try to give and to make it a game. It became a fun thing. I'd go into work, I would clean the floor when I wasn't asked, I'd make the coffee, I would just try to bring people a better day, just for fun and for free. And it became such a game. And I went places in that job that I really didn't have the skill to go. It's just by being of service and just by showing up as he told me to, a day at a time. And I've had to carry that through my life and to try and be of service. I mean, to come here tonight just to try and be of service, because I have a bad attitude and I never want to do anything. I've had the experience, we hear here that you do sober what you did drunk, and I had to take my sober geographic, and that happened when I was about 5 years sober. After that business had gone bankrupt, my father became very sick and died from cancer about a year later. It was very painful for me. I absolutely adored him. He had given me the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was my higher power. I was a daddy's girl, and I was very dependent upon my father. And when he died, it was really, really hard for me. And there was so much stress. This business had gotten so ugly at the end, and there was so much stress and so much money lost, and I felt very guilty and very responsible. And I had to come to see that I had nothing to do with when my father died, that he was on his own timetable and I was not in charge of that. But I had a real emotional need to be closer to my family and my roots. And frankly, I thought if I could leave Los Angeles at that time, things would be different. I didn't like it. I had gotten laid off from that job that I had before. I'd gone back to teaching. I was teaching in Southeast LA in a really tough school. I still couldn't pay my rent. My life was not very good, and I had the brilliant idea, I'll move. Things will be different. Gave away my furniture, left everybody, moved back east, moved in with my mother. I was 30 years old, living with Mom. I hate New Jersey. I never got along with my mother. And I woke up from this sober blackout and thought, what have I done? Here I am. What was I thinking? Why did I move? And a lot came out of that, because I do believe if we're to change, we have to change the pattern. We just can't change the problem. We have to get down to what our individual patterns are and change the pattern. My pattern was run. When in doubt, leave, move, or run away. And I stayed there for almost 2 years, even though I didn't like it. I stayed there, I got a job, I moved out from living with my mother. And I really got a chance to make a living amends to my mother. She had been through a lot, and we had never gotten along. She was married to an alcoholic. She had an alcoholic mother, an alcoholic daughter. And I really got a chance to be a daughter to my mother. And I saved money, and I got a job, and I stayed put, even though I didn't like it. And when I eventually moved back to Los Angeles, I came back because I wanted to stay sober. And I didn't like the AA back there, and I wasn't doing really well in AA. But when I came back, I had a job, I had a place to live, and I did it like a grown-up, and my life began to change. I also really got a chance to work the steps back there, because there wasn't much of a fellowship. AA is not like it is here. Not where I was anyway. I was in a very small town. And I was alone, I was single, I was very wounded from this broken relationship. I was grieving for the death of my father, and I just had to spend a lot of time alone and learn how to take care of myself. And I got a sponsor back there who totally changed my life. She had gotten sober here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to see her after I had been there for a while. And I felt terrible. My life was going nowhere. I didn't really have a job at the time. And I went to see her. I called her up, and she said, would you like to come and see me? And I said, I'd love to. And I drove about 2 hours to her house, and I sat down, and we started to talk. And she talked to me about the program, and we went over the steps, and I thought I should just go back to step 1. And she helped me to see that I was on step 6 and 7, the character defect steps, and that I had never been willing to let go of all the character defects that had always stood in my way. And for me, it comes back to my ego most of the time. And she told me, if you're in pain, most of the time it's your ego, and it's your sick need to look good. And it was for me. I didn't like this move. It didn't work out. It wasn't going my way. She told me, go home tonight, get on your knees, Be willing to clear the channel, and God will take the sting out of how you feel. If you're just willing to get out of the way. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to name your character defects. Just become willing. I did that evening, and she told me to come back the next week with an 8-step list and to write down my amends. Now, I had taken my inventory my first year, and I had done the amends, the ones that really bothered me, the ones I was having nightmares over. But the rest of the list I just tucked away in a drawer, just totally forgot about it. And she went over each amends with me, and she pointed out to me that in the big book, it talks about the promises. And she said to me, it's right, it says here, if you are painstaking about this phase of your development, and that comes after step 9. Now, I was 5 years sober, and I hadn't even gotten close to step 9. It took me 5 years to work the first 9 steps. And I don't recommend that time frame, but that's what it took me. And she had me write letters to people. I came back with the list. We went over it. I wrote letters all over the country. I called people. I cleaned up the wreckage of my past. And I sent money away. I had stolen money from one of the cocktail waitress jobs that I had. The bartender would forget to charge me for the drinks, and I would charge the customers and pocket the money. Anytime I could, I would do that. And I tried to call this bar, and they were out of business, and she suggested that I send the money to a 12-step house, and I did that. It wasn't a lot of money, but it changed my life because I became willing to clear away the wreckage of my past. And slowly, my life began to change after that, and I came back to Los Angeles, and I've been back here for a long time. I've been back here for 12 years. And where my life is today, I've been married for 10 years to a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That, quite frankly, is one of the biggest miracles of my life, that I've made it, that we've made it 10 years. I think they should give cakes for 10 years of AA marriage, and then some. We have a 7-year-old son that I absolutely adore, but being a free spirit, it was very, very hard for me. After I had this child, I couldn't believe how trapped I was. And I said to my husband, this is a mistake. This is terrible. He said, oh, you don't mean that. I said, yes, I do. This is terrible. But, through the women in Alcoholics Anonymous, I talked about the way I felt. I got a lot of support. I got a lot of help, and I absolutely adore my son today. He was one of the greatest gifts I've ever received, and I have a really good life, and it's all from Alcoholics Anonymous. When we get here, they tell us that if you would write down what you want, you'll treat yourself. I never got that concept because I always wanted a lot. And I always knew what I wanted. I knew the kind of car, the kind of clothes. That was easy for me, so I didn't get that. And it's just been in the last couple years that I've realized that I never would have thought to put on that list dignity, a sense of self-worth, peace of mind, not having to fight with the man at the toll booth, not having to fight people, places, and things my entire life, and to be able to be comfortable in my own skin. And I've gotten in here very, very slowly. I didn't know how to work. I didn't know how to be a girlfriend, never mind how to be a wife. It's come very slowly for me, to be a mother and to be a friend and to be a sober woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not a teeny bopper anymore. And I have dignity and I have self-respect. And, to be comfortable, I never would have thought about that, to be comfortable in my own skin. My time is up, and I am going to sit down, and I just want to tell you that, but it really all starts with physical sobriety. I've really had to the longer I'm sober, the less I know, and the more I just have to keep it a day at a time. We just don't drink and use a day at a time. And there were some times, I've had a lot of dark hallways in sobriety when I didn't have a job, and I've been fired, and I've been evicted, I've been rejected. And there were some times when I went to bed at night, and the world judged me as a loser. But I went to bed sober. And like somebody said, I got an A that day. I went to bed sober that night, and that's all I had to do. And at the time, it didn't seem like that was enough. But looking back, it is enough. Just sometimes that's all I've had, is just to be sober. And to go to bed sober, and to be able to get up the next day and start another day sober. And to just keep coming back and to keep trying. I want to tell you, if my life can change, your life can change. If your life can change, my life can change, because God does not play favorites. And if I can stay sober, you can stay sober. If you can stay sober, I can stay sober, because God does not play favorites. We all have an equal shot here. So I want to thank Mike for asking me to speak, and I want to thank you for being here and tell you that I really do love you. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.